At the beginning of episode 1, we see a Chinese woman running while carrying her baby. She asks another woman whether she has milk in her bosom. There is a man with her. The man tells her if someone is asking for her. Then we see a man riding a horse. He is the main character in this series. His name is Thomas Shelby. His arrival makes people on the street scattered away in fear. Then it is revealed if the Chinese woman is a fortune teller. Thomas is feared because he is the leader of a gangster group in this city. The group is called Peaky Blinders. After muttering incantations, the woman blows red powder at the horse.
They're doing a magic spell to make her win a race.
The horse is called Monahan Boy and he will compete in a horse racing competition. The film is set in Birmingham, England in 1919. And this is Peaky Blinders. Thomas is on his way to his house. We can see if the people in this city are respectful and afraid of him. Arriving at home, he meets his younger brother, Finn. And behind his house is his business empire. He runs an illegal horse racing betting business. We can see how busy Thomas's workers are in running this illegal business. Then we are introduced to Thomas's older brother, Arthur Shelby. Arthur is disappointed after Thomas decides to use red powder from the Chinese fortune teller. Arthur thinks it is cheating and Arthur is afraid of someone named Billy Kimber. He is another crime boss who owns a horse racing betting business. Inside an old steam train, there is a police officer called Inspector Chester Campbell, played by Sam Neill. He is reading a secret file about the weapons robbery, and the alleged suspect, in this case, is Arthur Shelby, then his younger brother Thomas Shelby, who is considered to have carried out an armed robbery. This man will be a nightmare for Peaky Blinders. And this is Freddy, who persuades the workers to strike. Then at a bar, Thomas, who is smoking, is approached by Freddy. He sees that Thomas is wearing his hat with a razor sewn in it. It's a Peaky Blinders signature. Freddy is disappointed with Thomas because according to the information he receives, he is on the Belfast police wanted list in a robbery case, even though he is just an ordinary communist who is not involved with the Peaky Blinders. A little trivia, they are both war veterans and Freddy once saved Thomas's life in the war. Casually, Thomas answers Freddy's disappointment, and then suddenly their former comrade in war, Danny, is throwing a fit. He has PTSD after the war. Previously he often hallucinates. Then a woman is seen pointing a gun. She is Aunt Polly. Then she slaps a man who turns out to be John Shelby for carelessly placing his gun so that his younger sister, Ada, almost got shot by her youngest brother, Finn. Aunt Polly is the mother figure in the Shelby family. Now for those who are confused about the Shelby family tree, I will explain it here. The first son is Arthur, then followed by Thomas, and the third is John Shelby. Then there is a younger sister named Ada, and Finn was the youngest. And then there is Aunt Polly, who is considered the advisor of this family. Arthur is furious after he learns about a policeman who is after them. It is revealed that the police are recruiting Irish people to become local police officers in the city to arrest gangsters and communists. Also, it seems like Thomas is hiding something from him. Aunt Polly meets Thomas at the church and orders him to tell her the truth. Thomas tells her if his men were supposed to steal motorcycles, but maybe because they were drunk, they stole the wrong crates. Inside the crates Thomas found 25 Lewis machine guns, 10,000 rounds of ammunition, 50 semi-automatic rifles, and 200 handguns loaded with bullets. These weapons will be sent to Libya. It was also revealed that BSA is the manufacturer of these weapons. Hearing that, baby Polly is surprised and disappointed with Thomas because this is why the police are targeting them. Polly then asks Thomas to leave the weapons in an area where the police could find them, but Thomas says he will move the weapon in 3 days, after the full moon. Ada meets her boyfriend, who turns out to be Freddy, in a secret place. He always asks for information about Peaky Blinders moves from her, then they kiss. Then we meet a beautiful woman named Grace. She comes to the bar where Thomas likes to drink coffee. She wants to be a waiter at this bar, but the owner of the bar, Harry, at first doesn't think she can do it. But because she manages to convince him that she is a good singer and can do the job, she is accepted. Back to Inspector Campbell, who is gathering all his men. We learn if Peaky Blinders is a cruel crime organization, they will kill anyone who is against them. And Campbell hates the corrupt police who are involved with them. He will be assisted by Irishmen whom he recruited on a mission to catch Peaky Blinders members involved in criminal activity. Arthur Shelby goes to a cinema accompanied by 2 prostitutes. Then suddenly, Inspector Campbell interrogates him. He asks Arthur about his involvement in a robbery. The truth is that Arthur doesn't know anything about it, since it was his brother Thomas who was involved. Campbell threatens Arthur. If he doesn't want his family members to die, Arthur has to cooperate with the police. Back at the bar, Grace seems busy serving the customers there, then suddenly Thomas opens the counter to buy rum. This is the first time they meet. Thomas then asks Grace if she's a prostitute since she is in the wrong place. Grace is silent for a moment. So who exactly is Grace? A battered Arthur returns home. He is seen being treated by his family. When Thomas arrives, he is surprised because the chief inspector comes to find the perpetrators of the BSA armed robbery. Grace is singing to entertain the patrons of the bar when Thomas comes with his men. Back to Ada, Thomas's sister, who is busy with her boyfriend. In the middle of the night, Thomas is awakened by a nightmare about the war. The next day, Danny is called crazy because of his hallucinations. He accidentally kills a man who asks him to go away. On the train, the Secretary of State, Winston Churchill, summons Inspector Campbell to discuss the stolen weapons. He doesn't want the press to know about it. Back to Thomas, who assigns Uncle Charlie to transport the weapons by boat. The original plan is that the weapons will be sent across the border until they are found the next morning by the train officers and their problem is considered solved. But unexpectedly, Thomas has other plans. He decides to hide the weapons in a cigarette warehouse on the old dock. Thomas wants the police to pay if they want to get the weapons. At a museum, Campbell is meeting with Grace. It turns out that Grace is an informant for Campbell. Campbell learns if the leader of Peaky Blinders is not Arthur. Grace thinks the IRA is responsible for the robbery. A little explanation: the IRA is the Irish Republican Army, a military organization that opposed Britain at that time. Then it is revealed that Grace's father was a cop who was killed by the IRA. Thomas takes Danny to a river. Since Danny had killed the Italians, Thomas is asked to kill Danny in front of him to prevent a war to break out between them. Danny calls Thomas Sergeant Major. Danny resigns to his fate and asks Thomas to take care of his wife and sons. Then Thomas shoots him.
You're a good man.
Yes, Sergeant Major.
Back at the betting shop, Thomas is visited by Arthur. He says that his horse has won. Thomas has a plan. He will make the horse win 3 times, and after that everyone in Birmingham will be betting on that horse. When that happens, he will make that horse lose. It is also revealed that Danny is not dead. He tricked the Italians to think that Danny is dead, but actually he is still alive. Charlie takes Danny to London and gives him a job there as a new member of Peaky Blinders. Thomas tells Aunt Polly if he has surrendered the weapons. Thomas passes by the bar and meets Grace. They look at each other. Episode 2 begins with Thomas driving his car. He is taking his older brother and his younger siblings to attend a fair in the Gypsy area. But they make a stop first because Thomas wants to buy a horse from his former military friend, Johnny, who is with the Lee family. While doing the transaction, the Lee family insults Thomas's mother. They call his mother a whore, which enrages Thomas. This is what Thomas does. Meanwhile, Inspector Campbell starts searching for the weapons in the small hill area. He and his men visit every house and round up everyone in that area. It turns out that Freddie, Ada's boyfriend, lives there. They are together when someone knocks on the door. Freddie is afraid he will be arrested by the police, so he escapes with Ada. The police who search his house found a prescription for Ada. Then Freddie flees from the city, while Ada is hiding in the house of a communist. Campbell then meets Aunt Polly at the church. He demands she hand over the weapons they are looking for, but Aunt Polly kisses him instead. Thomas, who just returned from the fair, finds his territory is ransacked by the police. Then Aunt Polly informs him that they have ransacked pubs that pay money for Peaky Blinders. The only pub they don't touch is the Garrison. The police want people to think that the Peaky Blinders are involved in the robbery. To restore public trust in Peaky Blinders, they give money to the pubs that have been ransacked by the police. Thomas tells Aunt Polly that he will meet Campbell after he strikes back. Thomas instructs his men to take all the photos of the King of England in their house, then they burn the photos in the middle of the street. A journalist from the Birmingham Press is invited by Thomas to write about this. Thomas tells him to publish the story because the police from Belfast have broken into their house and harassed the women there. In his office, Inspector Campbell receives a call from the Secretary of State, Winston Churchill. Campbell is surprised because it's late at night. The minister gets a report about what happens in Birmingham. They burn the king's photo there. He doesn't want the king to be involved and insulted. However, the minister warns him not to arrest anyone, as it will lead to a trial and the press will find out about the stolen weapons. Campbell learns that Thomas Shelby is a war hero and he plans all of this. While reading the newspaper, Aunt Polly realizes that Ada looks different. Suddenly Aunt Polly squeezed her breast. After that, she is taken to a clinic, and it is revealed that she is pregnant. When Ada learns this fact, she is afraid that the man who had impregnated her will be killed by her family. Back to Thomas, who is checking the horse he got from the Lee family. Uncle Charlie tells him if the Lee family sends a bullet with Thomas's name written on it, meaning the whole Lee family declared a war on the Peaky Blinders. After that, Thomas tries to ride his horse, but it looks like the horse has a problem with his legs. Suddenly Grace accidentally spills water in front of him to attract Thomas's attention. Grace is Campbell's informant, and she is trying to find more information about the missing weapons. Grace tells him that she just wants to ask him to let her sing every Saturday at the bar where she works. Thomas knows that Grace is not an ordinary woman, and he is attracted to her. He invites Grace to come to the horse race. Back at the betting shop of the Peaky Blinders, they are busy counting money for the horse race. Thanks to Thomas's strategy, a lot of people bet on Monahan Boy, the horse from the first episode. Auntie Polly informs him about his sister's pregnancy. Thomas rushes over to his sister, who is at the cinema. He asks for the name of the man who got her pregnant. At first she doesn't want to tell him, but Thomas insists her to tell the truth. He is surprised after knowing that it is Freddy who impregnates her. Because of Thomas's cunning strategy, Peaky Blinders get a lot of profit from the citizens who bet on Monahan Boy. In the third race they make him lose. As the dealer, Peaky Blinders get a lot of money, but Polly is very angry with Thomas's strategy since now they have to face Billy Kimber, the man who runs the local races. But Thomas, with his ambition, wants to be stronger than Billy Kimber. He thinks Billy Kimber has a weakness. What is Thomas's next plan? Polly urges Ada to abort her baby because she is sure that Freddy won't come back. Moreover, Freddy is a communist who is not in line with her family's principles. Thomas then meets Campbell at a restaurant that is outside their jurisdiction. Here we will see how Thomas manages to negotiate with Campbell, who originally wants to hunt them down. Thomas offers him a deal since they have their own goals. Thomas wants his business to be successful while Campbell wants Birmingham to be peaceful. Campbell then accuses Thomas of working with Freddy, a communist figure who is their fugitive. Thomas argues that he is not involved with the communists, although Campbell has found evidence of his younger sister's involvement with Freddy. Thomas doesn't bother. He tells Campbell if he wants to expand his business, he will work with Billy Kimber and ask the police inspector there not to interfere. He also asks Campbell not to touch the pubs and his betting business. Thomas's long list of requests prompts Campbell to ask, what is it for him? Thomas says that he has stolen weapons. Campbell is quite surprised to hear that, not only that Thomas threatens to sell the gun to the IRA in Belfast if he is arrested. If that happens, Campbell's career will be ruined, but if Campbell accepts this offer he will get the weapons, which will allow him to be promoted, and he will also receive a Medal of Honor. Campbell is lost for words. It means he accepts Thomas's offer. Thomas is smart, although a little cunning. Campbell then meets with Grace to talk about her mission. She has to get much closer to Thomas. She will be the only way to find the weapon without Campbell accepting the offer. Grace has to do everything she can to get this information, even if she has to sleep with Thomas. While sleeping, Thomas is haunted by a nightmare again. Suddenly, Curly, one of his subordinates, wakes him up. He takes Thomas to see the white horse he has bought from the Lee family. The horse is getting sicker and the disease spread to his heart. He thinks the horse is cursed by the Lee family by using black magic. So Thomas kills that horse. To comfort his heart and mind, Thomas comes to the bar. He asks Grace to accompany him for a drink. Here Grace tries to cheer him up. Grace charges him extra £3 for the dress she is going to buy and wear at the horse race. For the first time, Grace sees Thomas smiling. Thomas guesses that Grace is not an ordinary woman. She also doesn't come from a poor family. He guesses that Grace was from a wealthy family, but she gave birth without a husband, then ran away. He makes this guess based on Ada's situation. Grace then sings a sad song for Thomas until he drifts off to sleep.
In a neat little thread I was bound, happiness, friends and relations. I thought her the queen of with a black velvet band.
The next day, Aunt Polly and Ada are about to take the train to go to the doctor to abort Ada's baby, and suddenly Freddy is there to propose to Ada. Of course, Ada is so happy to see him. Freddy tells her that it is Thomas who tells him about her pregnancy. But Freddy doesn't want to follow Thomas's order to take Ada out of town. He wants to stay in this city. Meanwhile, Thomas is at the bar with his brother, Arthur, and suddenly two men with weapons come to the bar. And here is Billy Kimber, a local kingpin who is feared by the Peaky Blinders. Billy Kimber learns that Thomas has cheated at the horse race without his permission. It makes Billy feel humiliated and angry with them. He wants to shoot Thomas, but it turns out Thomas has a plan. He throws a bullet with his name on it. Thomas knows that Billy Kimber is also at odds with the Lee family. Thomas asks Billy to work with him to fight the Lee family. But before that, Billy tests him by dropping a coin and telling Thomas to pick it. It makes Thomas's brothers offended, but Thomas tells them to remain seated. Thomas picks up the coin and thanks Billy Kimber. Episode 3 begin with Thomas Shelby is seen walking towards the Garrison pub. Inside he orders a drink from Grace. Grace asks Thomas for extra money to buy a dress she will wear at the horse race. Then two men arrive to see Thomas. They tell Thomas if they're from the IRA or the Republic of Ireland Army. They hear rumors that the Peaky Blinders have the stolen BSA weapons, and they intend to buy the weapons at a high price. Thomas coldly tells them if he doesn't have the weapons. It makes them a little angry. After they leave, Grace gets extra money to buy her dress. Then we see Freddy waiting for someone. Then shortly after that, Ada comes wearing a wedding dress. They hold a secret wedding with only their priest as a witness. The information about two IRA members who want to buy BSA weapons reaches Inspector Campbell. Of course, he gets this information from Grace, his informant. Grace follows one of the IRA members who seemed drunk, but unfortunately, he knows if Grace is following him. Feeling threatened, Grace shoots the man with the gun she hid in her bag and then flees. But it seems like one of the residents has seen everything. Thomas finds out about Ada and Freddy's marriage. However, Freddy refuses to leave the city. Aunt Polly learns Thomas has made a pact with the police to kick Freddy from this town. Grace returns to her house. She looks traumatized by the incident since she just killed someone. To calm her mind, she smokes. Then she sees the red dress she is going to wear to the horse race. Colonel Campbell receives the report of the death of an IRA member. The witness says he sees a young woman leading the dead body. To his sergeant, Campbell says if the man is killed by his friend, not by his secret agent. Polly gives £200 to Freddy. Either they go to the United States or Thomas will take matters into his own hands. Freddy says he can't decide now. In fact, he says he's not afraid of Thomas. Grace is meeting Campbell at the museum. After the death of the IRA man, Campbell is worried for her safety, because Campbell treats Grace as his daughter. Grace insists that she is fine, and the mission must go on. Then at a Chinese shop, Thomas sees a suit specifically ordered by Billy Kimber, and soon after that Billy arrives. Thomas warns him that the Lee family will steal the betting money during the horse race. It is also revealed that Billy Kimber is interested in Grace, and he asks Thomas to invite her. Freddy is still stubborn and urges the BSA workers to strike and start the revolution. We see that Thomas Shelby is not just a leader of the Peaky Blinders, he is also like the head of the family. Because of his maturity and intelligent thinking, he can calm Arthur down, who is older than him. Even though Thomas is hiding a lot of things from Arthur, especially the fact that he has the stolen weapons, which makes Arthur got beaten up by the police back then. To comfort him, Thomas gave him a surprise. He has bought the Garrison pub, which is previously owned by Harry. Arthur is very happy because he always wants to have a pub. Then Sergeant Moss comes to see Thomas. Campbell asks him to deliver Freddy because of the workers' strike at BSA. He warns Thomas that he will arrest Ada, who has become Freddy's wife, as an accomplice. Freddy and Thomas meet by the river. He points his gun at Thomas's head. He gives back the money and the tickets Aunt Polly has given him. At the Garrison, Ada is looking for the two of them, fearing they might kill each other. Freddy refuses the money because Thomas thinks that Freddy has used Ada for his gain. Even though Freddy has loved Ada for a long time since they were teenagers. Thomas manages to kick Freddy's gun and points his gun at him. Thomas says that their marriage won't last long. While sleeping, Thomas is haunted by a nightmare. He dreams about that time when he was in the tunnel in France with Freddy and Danny. Suddenly an enemy soldier came, and when he was about to shoot Thomas, Freddy saved Thomas, then he was shot. Then Thomas wakes up from his sleep. Danny, who is now assigned in London, arrives. Danny tells him if he hears about the shooting of IRA members, people think Peaky Blinders are behind that. Danny is ordered to send someone to negotiate because this is a misunderstanding. While in Garrison, Grace meets Thomas and asks him why he is quarreling with Freddy. Thomas, who has a cold nature, doesn't want to talk, especially since Grace asks too many questions. Thomas ignores her and asks Grace about the dress she will wear tomorrow. The next day, Grace is seen getting herself ready to look beautiful, especially in front of Thomas. Thomas drives a luxury car to pick Grace up. Elsewhere, Arthur and John gather their men to thwart the Lee family's plan to steal the betting money at the horse race. Arriving at the horse racing event, Thomas and Grace are seen entering a party. To get Billy Kimber's attention, Thomas asks Grace for a dance. Meanwhile, Arthur and his men manage to get the stolen money from the Lee family. Arthur takes the money to Thomas, who takes it back to Billy. But, in return, Peaky Blinders will manage the security in the horse racing event with a 5% profit. Billy doesn't care and tells Thomas to talk to his accountant since he's busy ogling Grace. Apparently, Billy asks for one condition: he wants to have Grace for 2 hours, and Billy lends his partner to Thomas for 2 hours as well. Grace thinks these men consider herself a prostitute, who will be sacrificed for a deal. Grace starts to get a little scared, but because of her mission, she can't refuse it. Billy even bet £10 that he can sleep with Grace within an hour. Thomas takes Billy's woman to his car. Thomas seems worried about Grace's condition, and it is also revealed that Billy's partner is not a prostitute, she is just a hat maker. Although Thomas is a gangster who often justifies anything, this time his heart is against it, especially since Thomas likes Grace. Back at his house, Billy is trying to win Grace's heart, and with a little force, he tries to kiss her. Grace tries to take her gun, but suddenly Thomas arrives and tells Billy if she is a prostitute with syphilis, Thomas doesn't want Billy to get infected. This strategy works. They quickly leave Billy's house afterward. On the way home, Grace is upset because Thomas offers herself to Billy, but Grace realizes that Thomas changes his mind and comes to save her. Grace asks why Thomas changes his mind. Thomas doesn't say anything, his expression remains cold. My guess is, that's because he starts liking her and doesn't want anything bad to happen to her. Episode 4 begin with Ada and Freddie on a boat. They both just returned from their honeymoon. The couple looks so happy and looks forward to their baby's arrival. Then we see Freddie give £200 to someone for the revolution. He gets the money from the Russian embassy. Thomas Shelby, who is walking, is approached by Jeremiah, the person he assigned to follow Freddie. Thomas learns that Freddie is coming back to this town. Arriving at the betting shop, Thomas finds someone is making a fuss because he is late to place a bet. A little boy uses that distraction to sneak in. Thomas and Aunt Polly then head to the garrison for a family meeting. One of his men is guarding the shop. Then a carriage arrives, and there are several people inside. The little boy from earlier opens the door for them. It turns out that they are from the Lee family. They are here to steal the money in the Peaky Blinders betting shop when the family is gathered at the garrison. Johnny is a widower with 4 children. She needs a wife to take care of his children. When Johnny says that he wants to marry Lizzie Stark, Thomas and Arthur are laughing. Even Aunt Polly tries not to laugh, afraid she will hurt John's feelings. Apparently, Lizzie, the woman he wants to marry, is a prostitute. Of course, they can't believe that the woman really loves John. Johnny thinks Thomas is a wise man, so he asks his brother about the sincerity of his future wife, Lizzie. But then they hear the shocking news. His younger brother, Finn, reports that there is a robbery at the headquarters. The money in their headquarters is stolen by the Lee family. It doesn't end there. They find a wire cutter on the table, which means the Lee family left a dangerous joke here. Sure enough, a hand grenade is installed specifically for Thomas. Thomas can't find the grenade in the shop. Thomas rushes to his car and finds his brother, Finn, in his car. Apparently, he enters the car through the front window, without opening the car door. When Thomas tells Finn to get down through the front window, then this happens. The next day, Thomas, assisted by his friend Johnny, goes to the Lee family headquarters to negotiate and end the feud between them. It is revealed that the Lee family is led by a woman. Thomas is smart. He shows her a bullet with Billy Kimber's name engraved on it. It means Thomas could have pitted the Lee family against Billy or made her agree to have a truce. Thomas needs the Lee family to help him fight Gazy, who has manipulated the horse racing betting. It is revealed that they are family on Thomas's mother's side. Thomas's offer seems to have been accepted by the Lee family. Back to Ada and Freddie, who are at their house. It is revealed that Stanley Chapman is a Russian who is involved in the revolutionary mission and receives £200 from Freddie. Ada tells this information to Aunt Polly, who tells it to Thomas, along with Stanley's address. Thomas then tells this information to Inspector Campbell. Thomas convinces him that Stanley is far more dangerous than Freddie, especially since he has the £200 cash from the Russian government to the Communist Party to carry out a revolution. Inspector Campbell will be awarded if Stanley is arrested. Campbell warns Thomas to show him the hiding place of the weapons because Churchill keeps asking him about it. He threatens to kill the entire Peaky Blinders family if Thomas doesn't return the weapons. After hearing this, Thomas wants to kill Campbell, but he stops himself. The next day Campbell visits Stanley to arrest him along with the 200-pound bills as evidence thanks to the address provided by Thomas. Then Campbell orders his men to interrogate Stanley to find Freddy's location. Freddy meets Aunt Polly at his mother's grave. Aunt Polly, who loves Ada like her own child, asks Freddy to take her out of town because the police will hunt them down after finding Stanley and the money. Freddy, who is not stupid, is not afraid because Stanley doesn't know where they're hiding and that's how they work. Freddy is stubborn and doesn't care about Polly's advice. But Freddy is disappointed that Ada leaks his mission. Then we see Campbell's men torture Stanley to reveal Freddy's hiding place until Stanley dies. Back to Thomas, Billy Kimber and his accountant, Robert, are visiting the Peaky Blinders headquarters. According to Robert's report, Peaky Blinders has done a good job. Thanks to their help, Billy earns a lot of profit in the last 8 races. Also, Billy comes to deliver an important letter to Thomas. Thomas opens the letter. The letter says that now they have an official betting license. For this achievement, they cheer happily. Now we will see Grace in action. She is trying to find information about the hiding place of the BSA weapons. Grace tells him if their cigarettes are in bad condition, and she asks Arthur if the cigarettes are stolen goods. But Arthur tells her, according to Tommy, the best hiding places for stolen goods are on petrol boats near the junctions, so they can escape quickly. Grace tells this information to Campbell, who immediately sends his men to search the suspected warehouses based on the information Grace gets from Arthur. But they still can't find the weapons. Grace, who wants to go home, is surprised when Thomas says that Grace asks a lot about their business. Hearing that, she's worried that Thomas has found out about her mission. Then Thomas takes her to church. Thomas asks her if she's a Catholic, and Grace says yes. Here, Thomas learns that Grace is good at calculations and bookkeeping. If Billy Kimber is Robert, then Thomas needs Grace as his accountant. Grace is worried when Thomas calls her a liar. Apparently, he is talking about her religion. He thinks she is not a Catholic since usually, a Catholic will make a sign of the cross when entering a church. Hence Thomas deduces that Grace is a Protestant. Hearing this, Grace is immediately relieved because her identity is still safe. Thomas's offer is accepted by Grace and then they kiss. The next day Thomas invites Lizzie to talk in his car. In the car, Thomas gives her some money as her wedding gift with John. Later it's revealed that Lizzie was a prostitute for the past 2 years and had been sleeping with Thomas after the war. Lizzie says that she really loves John and she has changed. Thomas then asks her to spend a night with him for the last time. It's a test since Lizzie's eyes keep looking at the money he just gives her. Lizzie agrees to sleep with him for the last time. Lizzie's answer is enough for Thomas to conclude that Lizzie hasn't changed. Thomas tells her to leave, and Lizzie is angry because Thomas tricks her. Grace informs Campbell about her promotion in the Peaky Blinders, especially about Thomas, who assigns him a new role as an accountant and secretary. Campbell reminds Grace to be careful. Back to Thomas, who tells John about Lizzie. He tells him if Lizzie agrees to spend a night with him for money. He tells Johnny if he can make his own decision. Then Thomas goes to Garrison to give Grace her contract. Grace wants to celebrate this with champagne, but Thomas tells her to save it for a special day. Thomas asks Grace to deliver a letter to Ada. That night Thomas is cautious because there is someone in his room. It turns out it is Johnny. He is frustrated because he can't marry Lizzie. Thomas tries to entertain him by mimicking their old grandfather. John is quite amused by that. Thomas then tells him to wear his best clothes tomorrow. Tomorrow they will end their feud with the Lee family. The next day Arthur, Thomas, and all of his men are ready with their weapons. Strangely, Arthur asks them to tuck a flower into the pocket of their coat. Johnny is shocked and angry when Thomas has set himself up with a girl from the Lee family. Thomas asks Johnny to accept this to end the war between them. John reluctantly accepts this, although he is worried that the woman he will marry is an old woman. Then Johnny isn't angry anymore when he sees his future wife is a beautiful woman. John is so happy, and so does everyone there. And finally, John marries her. Since this is a celebration between 2 gangster families, of course there is a lot of alcohol here. Ada, who is pregnant, is drunk and dancing uncontrollably. Then suddenly her water broke. Thomas rushes to take her to the midwife. While Ada is busy giving birth, the men are busy drinking and smoking. Freddy, who hears that Ada is giving birth, runs to see her, and finally, a baby boy is born safely. Freddy is happy, but Freddy's happiness doesn't last long. Suddenly the police arrive to arrest Freddy. Aunt Polly goes to the bar and immediately scolds Thomas and slaps him for lying since Thomas says he knows nothing. Just like that, the happiness turns into sadness in the Peaky Blinders family. Episode 5. Begin with Thomas walk to the grave of someone named Daniel Owen. Who is he? Aunt Polly is walking in the rain with a basket of food. Apparently, she brings the food for Ada and her baby. We can see if Ada doesn't bother to take food from the previous days. It seems that she is still disappointed and angry at the Shelby family, especially at Thomas, who she thinks leaked Freddy's whereabouts to the police. Freddy is in prison now. Thomas tells Polly if it wasn't him who told the police about Freddy's whereabouts. Aunt Polly won't believe him since Thomas can't swear on the Bible. Then Thomas visits Grace, who is doing her new job as an accountant and secretary. Thomas draws a black star in the appointment book. Thomas says that day will be the day where he will end Billy Kimber and his men. Even the rest of Thomas's family doesn't know about this plan. Arthur and his younger brother, Johnny, are visiting a newly opened boxing ring in their territory. The owner is not aware of the power of the Peaky Blinders. Arthur orders the owner to pay fees, but the ringmaster refuses since he doesn't approve of the Peaky Blinders. Arthur wants to give him a lesson, but then someone calls his name. It's his father, Arthur Shelby Sr. Arthur takes him home and offers him a meal. Everyone in this family hates him, including Aunt Polly, who tells him to immediately leave. But Arthur, the eldest son, thinks his father has changed for the better. Then Thomas comes, and later it is revealed that if their father had abandoned them 10 years ago, that's why they hated him. Thomas tells him to leave.
He's a selfish bastard. You want to see him?
Arthur comes to Garrison to take £5 from the cashier. Grace then asks him about the money that is regularly sent to London every week. It is £1 10 shilling and under Daniel Allen's name. We learn that it's Daniel's name that's written on the tombstone. Daniel Allen is Thomas's old friend from the war. People think he is already dead, but the truth is he's in London, working for Peaky Blinders. Arthur tells Grace not to ask things that don't concern her. Then he gives a coin to her, so she won't tell Thomas that he takes some money. Later, Grace is visiting Danny's fake grave. Arthur goes to the boxing ring with his brother, Finn, to see their father. His father tells him if he was in America all this time. He tells Arthur about his plan to open a hotel and a casino there. He persuades his son to invest some money. Arthur is tempted, but his father advises him to talk to Thomas first. He doesn't want them to fight later. But Arthur doesn't want to do it since he's done following orders. He agrees to help his father, and to celebrate their plan, Arthur Sr. invites his son to a sparring match in the ring.
Ghetto? They're Shelby Jr.
Back to Thomas, who is relaxing in the garrison. A stranger wants to talk to him. His name is Byrne. He is an important man in the IRA, and Ryan, who was shot in Thomas's territory back then, was his cousin. As we know, Ryan was shot by Grace when he tried to take her to the IRA headquarters. Byrne is from South Armagh. He is an influential figure there. Thomas realizes if he's not an ordinary man. Thomas invites him to the parlor. Byrne intends to buy the stolen weapons from Thomas, since Danny keeps running his mouth in London, saying Thomas is the one who has the weapons along with the ammunition. Thomas says that Danny is crazy, which isn't far from the truth. But Byrne doesn't believe him. He wants Thomas to give him the weapons or he will kill Thomas and his family. Thomas takes the threat seriously. He admits that he has the weapons and he will sell them to Byrne at the right price. Then Thomas meets with Inspector Campbell. Thomas points out Byrne from the wanted poster. Turns out he's the brigade commander of the South Armagh IRA. Thomas asks Campbell to catch him with the weapons as bait, but Thomas wants word put out in Ireland that he is not involved. Campbell will get the medal for himself afterward. After an agreement, Thomas asks him about the person who leaked Freddy's whereabouts. Campbell says if it was him. Arthur secretly gives several stacks of money to his father to fulfill his ambition to build a casino in the United States. Arthur is careless and hasn't talked to Thomas about this. They plan to leave on Friday by ship. Back to Garrison. Thomas comes in a hurry. He looks panicked. He asks Grace to help him because there will be 2 IRA men coming. The plan is after the men come and sit, Thomas will give her a signal, then she will point a gun at them. There is another police hiding, ready to arrest them. Byrne arrives with his friend. They immediately ask Thomas for the locations of the stolen weapons. After he gives the address, Thomas asks them for the money, but it turns out these 2 IRA men want to kill Thomas after they have the address. When they point their guns, Thomas gives Grace the signal. Unexpectedly, Grace fires the gun and shoots the head of Byrne's friend, killing him instantly. Thomas is choked by Byrne. He remembers what happened to him back then when he was at war in France. Thomas manages to hit Brian's face with a spittoon. He hits him repeatedly until he dies. Grace is scared after witnessing that. Grace and Thomas hug each other after it's over, horrified by what they just do. The police come, but Thomas is angry with them since they are late. Thomas escorts Grace home and apologizes to her. The next day, Grace meets Campbell in a park. Grace tells him about what happened yesterday. She was feeling out of control, and it was Grace who killed an IRA member, not Thomas. In fact, it was Thomas who saved her. Grace then says her mission ends here and she will resign. She asks the inspector to leave Thomas alone after the weapons are found. She wants Campbell to promise her. It is revealed here that the grave of Daniel Owen is the place where the weapons are hidden. Grace gets the information from Arthur. Later that night, Campbell digs up the grave and manages to find the weapons he has been looking for. The next day, Grace goes to the grave and meets the old Campbell, who suddenly proposes to Grace to be his wife. Of course, Grace is surprised to hear that, and she tells Campbell if he deserved better, because actually Grace always thinks of Campbell as a father. Arthur is waiting for his father, but he doesn't come. Arthur feels stupid after he is fooled by his father. He finds his father preparing to leave at the train station. Disappointed, Arthur demands his father give the money back, but his father threatens to kill him. Arthur knows if he can't win, so he walks away. Arthur then goes home and meets Aunt Polly, who finds out if he takes £500 for his father. Arthur is more frightened when Aunt Polly tells him to tell Thomas himself. Thomas goes to the grave. He realizes that someone has dug the grave. Then he asks his younger brother, Finn, to look out for himself, because he has to go away for a while. Meanwhile, at his office, Campbell rounds up his men. He tells them if they have found the weapons, prevent the weapon from being used to kill innocent people. But the culprit of this crime is still at large, but they will arrest him tonight. Seems like he has forgotten his promise to Grace. Thomas then goes to Garrison to say goodbye to Grace because he has to go away for a while. But apparently, Campbell and his men are almost there. Grace decides to take Thomas to her home. Thomas spends the night there. Campbell arrives at Garrison. He threatens Harry with a gun and asks him to disclose Thomas's whereabouts. Harry can't lie, so he tells him if Thomas is with Grace. At the boxing ring, Arthur is heavily drunk and still feels frustrated. He intends to hang himself, but it doesn't work because the rope is not strong enough to hold his weight.
You can see it getting smaller. She said she's sticking to the man.
Thomas then comes to see Arthur. He sees rope marks around his neck. Thomas already knows the story from Aunt Polly, and he doesn't blame Arthur. Thomas jokes, saying if Arthur wants to kill himself, he should have used a gun to shoot himself. After that, he tells his brother some good news, and he shows him a business card with Shelby Brother Limited written on it. Thomas explained that this company is owned by 3 of them and John is one of the owners. Arthur is happy again now. Thomas says that Inspector Campbell has left town, so they are safe now. Later at the Peaky Blinders headquarters, Johnny's wife from the Lee family is also seen there. And Thomas is enjoying a cigarette while reading the newspaper. Thomas looks happy. Seems like everything is going to be fine. Episode 6 start with a man named Mr. Zhang. He is a suit maker for the gangster bosses. He is busy brushing his teeth in the morning when suddenly Inspector Campbell comes to his house. Campbell looks nervous. He says he's here because other cops recommend this place for the other services. It makes us wonder, why is he here when the shop is still closed? Thomas Shelby is seen walking toward Arthur's house. He wakes him up and tells him to prepare himself and his weapons for today's mission. Then he goes to Charlie's house to prepare the car they will use. Even John, who is busy with his wife in the morning, is told by Thomas to get ready immediately. Then Thomas heads to the Peaky Blinders headquarters. Aunt Polly is seen praying for their safety. Back to Campbell, who is at Mr. Zhang's house. It turns out that Campbell is here to enjoy other services from a prostitute. Grace comes to the museum where she used to report about Peaky Blinders to Campbell. This time it is Sergeant Moss who is there. He calls Grace a whore and gives Grace a letter. The letter is from Campbell. He is disappointed with Grace, who rejects him. Also, Campbell knows if Grace is actually in love with a criminal who is supposed to be her enemy. He thinks Grace's father will be disappointed with her since she has betrayed every principle and standard of honor that was her birthright for his love for Thomas. Thomas goes to Mr. Zhang's shop to pick up his suit. Mr. Zhang tells him if Campbell is here and Thomas pays extra for that information. Thomas then enters his room and points his gun at Campbell. Campbell refuses to fight since he is unarmed. Thomas mocks him because Campbell always says he wants to clean this city, yet here he is, no different than his predecessor. Campbell tells him if he has the weapons, he will get a medal from Churchill, but Thomas still doesn't know how they get that information. Campbell tells him that his heart will be broken by the end of the day, just like his. Thomas says he still has his family. Aunt Polly is visiting Ada and her baby. It is revealed here that Aunt Polly had 2 children, a 3 and a 5-year-old. For some reason she was arrested by the police. The 2 children were taken by the church, and until now their whereabouts are unknown. Thomas saves her. But Ada is still mad at Thomas. Then Aunt Polly tells her something important regarding Freddy. It will happen today. A policeman comes to Freddy's cell to take him away. A battered and scared Freddy asks him not to send him to Bridgestone Prison, because he will be killed there. The man says he won't make it to Bridgestone Prison. Campbell's report to the Prime Minister makes him happy, knowing that he has found the stolen BSA weapons, and he will be honored in the new year. Then he asks Campbell about the informant who is involved in this operation, Grace. Campbell puts in a good word for Grace. As for the Peaky Blinders, Campbell won't catch them because he doesn't want the public to know about them. He has another plan for them. Then we return to the Peaky Blinders headquarters, where they are having a meeting before carrying out an important mission. They will take down Billy Kimber today. The Peaky Blinders have allied themselves with the Lee family, making them strong enough to take down Billy Kimbers in the Worcester racetrack today. After Billy's men are killed, Thomas himself will face Billy Kimber. Then Aunt Polly asks Ada to enter. Ada is mad at Thomas all this time, but Thomas wants to talk to her about Freddy today. We see a prisoner's car with Freddy inside. A police officer removes the handcuffs on Freddy's wrists. He says he is here ordered by the Peaky Blinders. Freddy is relieved because this is Thomas's plan. The police car has to stop because there is a wagon blocking the road. Unexpectedly, Danny is waiting for them. He takes out the stolen Lewis weapon and starts firing. This is one of the stolen BSA weapons. Freddy, who is saved by Danny, is confused about why he is still alive. Back to Thomas and his gang in the garrison. They are relaxing before the mission. Thomas talks to Grace, who looks anxious. Grace reveals that she will leave while Thomas is on his mission. Thomas, who still doesn't know his lover's true identity, tries to convince her. After this is over, he will establish a real company. Peaky Blinders will have one of the largest official racetracks in the country. Thomas wants Grace to be there for him. Thomas, who loves her, wants to marry her. Grace cries. She wants to tell Thomas the whole truth. Suddenly Arthur comes and says Billy Kimber and his men are heading here. Thomas then returns to his house and tells Ada to hide. Thomas thinks that Ada is a traitor because his mission has been leaked, and he will have a hard time dealing with Billy Kimber since the Lee family who is supposed to help him is in Worcester. While Aunt Polly says love has blinded him, it is Grace who betrays him since Thomas was the one who told her everything. Thomas is surprised. He thinks his aunt is right. Then she goes to the empty garrison because everyone has left the city. Grace wants to leave, but then Aunt Polly knows about Grace's real identity. She pulls out a hairpin from behind her hair. Grace, feeling threatened, pulls out her gun and points it at Aunt Polly. She says she is a royal agent and she won't hesitate to take action. Aunt Polly isn't afraid at all. They sit together and talk. Aunt Polly takes out her cigarette. Aunt Polly asks Grace if she loves Thomas. Grace says yes. Grace asks her about how Thomas was before the war. Aunt Polly tells her that Thomas was a nice guy who laughed a lot. He wanted to work with horses, but the war had changed him. He even threw his medal away. Aunt Polly tells her that after everything is over, Thomas might forgive her and take her in since she saved Thomas when he was a fugitive. But Polly will never forgive nor accept her. Polly is the one who runs the business of the heart of the family, and for her, Grace is a snitch. Aunt Polly tells her to leave the city immediately or she will kill Grace herself. Before she leaves, Grace tells Aunt Polly that Polly is upset because she thinks one day she might lose Thomas. Back to Thomas, who talks to his men on how to deal with Billy Kimber's attack, since they are outnumbered 3-1. Hopefully, their experience in the war will help them this time. Sergeant Moss, who receives information about the impending war, reports it to Campbell. He is surprised by Campbell's answer, who orders all police officers to stay away from the place. Campbell will let them fight and take care of the rest later. Moss is disappointed with his response. Back at the garrison, while waiting for Billy, Thomas is talking with Harry, the previous owner of the pub. Even though Thomas is a criminal, the residents of the city still want him to win this war. Harry asks him about Grace, but Thomas tells him that Grace is in the past and she is no longer his concern, while he reminisces about the good times with Grace. Finn then comes and informs them that Billy Kimber has arrived. Thomas is ready with his men, and we can see if the Peaky Blinders are outnumbered. Billy mocks them since Thomas is outnumbered and doesn't have many weapons. Then Danny and Freddy show up. They have a Lewis machine gun with them. When the war is about to start, suddenly Ada comes with her baby. She asks them to stop this. She reminds them about the war in France. His brother and his husband must know how bad it was that after the war it's a woman like her who suffers. Billy agrees with Ada, but then he shoots Thomas and Danny. Danny is killed. Then Thomas shoots Billy in the head.
It's over. Go home to your families.
After Billy is dead, Thomas tells Billy's men to go home since their boss is dead. They bring Billy's body with them. Grace goes to see Campbell. She asks Campbell what he told Thomas earlier. How did they find out about her true identity? Campbell tells Grace what he has said to Thomas, and he says that Grace breaks 2 hearts that day, including her own heart. At the garrison, they're taking out the bullet from Thomas's shoulder while Thomas howling in pain. Then they pay their last respects to Danny, who dies in this war.
To Danny was bang. Danny.
Sergeant Moss reports this incident to Campbell. It turns out this war only left one victim, Billy Kimber, which means Peaky Blinders have won the war. Also, Freddy escaped because there was no officer on the street, following Campbell's orders. And if he wants to arrest Peaky Blinders for murder, it can't be done since there are no officers to be a witness there. Again, this is because of Campbell's orders. Campbell then calls Minister Churchill to inform him about his decision. The Peaky Blinders are celebrating at the garrison. Thomas then visits Grace in her flat. He already knows Grace's real identity. Their relationship has to end here since they have different principles. Thomas can't let go of his gun. For now, his identity as a gangster and criminal can't be with a policeman who is his archenemy. Grace gives Thomas an address in London. She will be there for a week and have plans for their future. After that, Thomas returns to the garrison. He asks Aunt Polly to get the special champagne for him, a drink that Grace has bought for them. Thomas tells them if the Shelby Brothers Ltd has become the 3rd largest legal racetrack operation in the country. Aunt Polly knows if Thomas is heartbroken inside. Thomas types a letter to Grace. He says that he learned long ago to hate his enemies, and for the first time he loves his enemy. He also really appreciates Grace's idea to go to New York, but he has worked hard for everything. He has responsibilities to his family, the people he loves and needs to protect. Before the war, when he wants to make a decision, he will flip a coin. He will do it again later. He will tell Grace about his decision in 3 days. Meanwhile, Grace is waiting for her train at the train station. Suddenly someone arrives there. It turns out to be Campbell, who points his gun at her. Thomas flips his coin, then we hear a gunshot.